This stupid maid will take the fall when we finally kill him.
Are we sure we should be saying this in front of her?
This mumu maid that cannot even speak English well, you think she can follow French? Relax, speak freely. She does not understand one single word coming out of our mouths.
If you say so.
I am telling you, watch her face. Nothing. She is folding towels like a machine. These ones, once you talk fast, talk grammar, talk anything that does not sound like pidgin, their brain just shuts down. That is why I chose her.
Adaeze had said all of that in French, smiling the whole time, stirring sugar into Pa Bernard's tea like she was discussing the weather. Tobena had answered her in the same language, glancing only once toward the window where Ireti stood folding towels, eyes down, face soft and empty. Neither of them noticed that her hands had gone still. Adaeze thought she had found the perfect maid, deaf to the only language that mattered in that house, useful exactly because she understood nothing. But the woman folding towels by that window had heard every single word, and what Adaeze did not know, what she could not have possibly guessed, was that this maid's silence was not confusion. It was a woman taking notes. Pa Bernard Okonji had built his textile empire from one rented warehouse on Apapa Road into a name that sat on fabric labels across 3 countries. He had buried his first wife 6 years ago after 31 years of marriage, and something in him had never fully recovered from that particular kind of quiet that follows a house once the laughter leaves it. He married Adaeze 4 years later. She was 30 years younger than him, polished, well-spoken, the kind of woman who knew exactly which fork to use and exactly when to laugh at a joke that wasn't funny. Society Lagos called it a beautiful late life story. Pa Bernard called it a second chance he didn't think he deserved. Tobena was not his blood. He had taken the boy in at age 9, the son of a business partner who died in a car accident on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, and raised him as his own. School fees, business training, a seat at the company table the moment he turned 25. Pa Bernard called him my son without flinching, without ever once needing the word adopted to soften it. He trusted both of them completely. That was always going to be the problem. Ireti came into the house 8 months ago, after Pa Bernard's first hospital scare, a heart that beat a little too irregularly, a doctor's order for a live-in nurse who could watch his medication, his meals, his moods. She was 26, OND in nursing from a small polytechnic in Osun State, quiet in the way that made people assume there was nothing happening behind her eyes. She spoke English carefully, slowly, with the rounded edges of someone translating in her head before the words came out, which was conveniently for everyone in that house exactly the impression she wanted to give. What none of them knew, what she had never once had a reason to mention, was that her mother taught French literature in a secondary school in Cotonou for 11 years before relocating the family to Lagos when Ireti was 13. She had grown up correcting her mother's students' essays at the kitchen table. She had spoken French before she'd fully mastered pidgin. She let the house believe what it wanted to believe. The first time it happened, she almost gave herself away. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening. Adaeze and Tobena were at the dining table going over some papers, invoices Ireti assumed, company business. And Adaeze said something to him in French, quick, casual. "He's getting slower with the stairs, did you notice?" Tobena answered without looking up. "He refuses the cane, stubborn man." Ireti, standing nearby with Pa Bernard's evening tablet in a small dish, felt the words land in her chest in her mother's language, familiar as her own name. The cardiologist had actually mentioned just that morning that Pa Bernard should be stretching his legs more often, walking the corridor a little each evening instead of sitting so long. And here was a chance to pass that along, naturally, the way she sometimes did when she had useful information and the right opening presented itself. Her mouth actually opened. "Actually, the doctor said he should be..." "Even better," Adaeze said in French, still not looking up from the sugar she was stirring into Pa Bernard's tea. "Let him struggle, let him die faster so I stop having to look at his wretched face every morning." Tobena's pen stopped moving. He didn't say anything. Ireti's mouth closed around the rest of her sentence like a door swinging shut on its own.
Adaeze glanced up then,
catching the small movement of Ireti's lips, the half-formed word still hanging somewhere in the air. "Did you say something, Ireti?" Ireti made her face go blank, soft, empty, the way it always was. "No, ma, the tablets are ready." She set the dish down and walked back to the kitchen, heart hammering. She had almost told them, almost let slip in pure reflex that she understood every word. And in the 2 seconds it took her to stop herself, something shifted in her, quietly, permanently. Because if they would speak so freely about something as small as his weakening knees, what else were they comfortable saying in a language they assumed sealed the room? She decided, standing at that kitchen counter with her back to the dining room, that her silence was no longer an accident. It was a decision. Pa Bernard, for his part, adored her. Not in the way men adore young women, nothing like that. In the way a tired old man adores the one person in his house who treats him like a person and not a portfolio. "You remind me of my Ngozi," he told her once, late on a Sunday evening, the two of them on the veranda while she checked his blood pressure cuff. "My late wife, she had your same way of listening. Most people listen waiting for their turn to talk. She listened like the thing you are saying actually mattered to her." Ireti smiled, wrapping the cuff around his arm. "I'm sure she was a wonderful woman, sir." She was. He watched the numbers climb on the small screen. "You know, you are the only person in this house who speaks to me without wanting something. Adaeze wants my comfort. Tobena wants my approval. You just..." He gestured loosely at the cuff, at the chair, at the evening. "You just take care of me." She didn't trust herself to say anything to that. She just nodded and recorded the reading in his chat. He pushed her gently about her career. "This nursing job is not the end of your story, Ireti. You hear me? You should go back, get your degree. A woman with your patience could do anything in this world. Maybe one day, sir. Not maybe, when." He said it the way he said most things, settled, final, kind. "I'll help if you let me." She thanked him and changed the subject, the way she always did when his generosity threatened to undo her composure completely. The second time French entered the dining room, it was sharper. Pa Bernard was at the head of the table, struggling slightly with the stiff lid of a jam jar, and Tobena said something to Adaeze across the table, too quick for anyone watching his face to suspect anything. "Look at him. Can't even open a jar anymore, and this is the man we're all supposed to fear?" Adaeze didn't even bother lowering her voice. "He's an old fool playing to be strong. Let him struggle." Pa Bernard finally got the lid loose and laughed, oblivious, holding it up like a small victory. "There, you see, still got it." "Well done, Daddy," Adaeze said warmly, switching back to English without missing a beat, reaching over to pat his hand. He turned to them, smiling, genuinely curious. "What were you two saying just now? You looked like you were planning something." Adaeze's laugh was instant, practiced, smooth as oil. "Nothing serious, my love. I'm helping Tobena with his French. He has that supplier meeting in Abidjan next month, remember? We were just practicing small phrases." "Ah," Pa Bernard nodded, satisfied. Good, good, useful skill." Ireti, refilling his water glass at that exact moment, felt something hot rise behind her ribs. Not at the insult about the jar. Old men struggled with jars, that was simply true, and it didn't wound her on her behalf the way the lie did. It was the lie itself, the smoothness of it, the way Adaeze had taken something cruel and repackaged it as devotion in under 3 seconds, right in front of the man who trusted her most in the world, and he swallowed it completely. Ireti set the water glass down a little too hard. Nobody noticed. She noticed. By the third time, they had stopped lowering their voices entirely. It was a Thursday afternoon. Pa Bernard was resting upstairs. Adaeze and Tobena sat in the small study with the door half open, papers spread across the desk between them, and Ireti, passing in the hallway with a stack of linens, had her own name inside the study. She stopped just outside the door frame. The accountant says the transfer needs Pa Bernard's signature before the end of the month, Tobena said in French, flipping through a folder. If we push it past that, the whole timeline shifts, Adaeze said. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him. He doesn't read anymore. His eyes are too weak. He trusts me to read it to him. And after? After, everything routes through the new account. The land in Ijebu, the Lekki properties, all of it. By the time anyone thinks to check, it will have already been done. Ireti stood very still in the hallway, the linens pressed against her chest like something that could shield her. This wasn't gossip anymore. This wasn't cruelty over a jam jar. This was a plan. She didn't fully understand the shape of it yet, what timeline, what account, what came after the signature, but her hands had gone cold the way they had the very first day, and this time the feeling did not pass. She walked on down the hallway before either of them looked up. That night, she lay awake in the small staff room off the kitchen, staring at the ceiling, turning the conversation over and over. She thought about telling Pa Bernard directly, walking into his room in the morning and saying, "Sir, your wife and your son are planning something. I heard them. I understand French." But she thought about how that would sound. A maid, a nurse, but in their eyes still just staff, claiming to understand a language nobody knew she spoke, accusing his wife of 5 years and the boy she had raised since childhood with nothing but her word against two people who had spent years building his trust, brick by brick. He would want proof. He should want proof. And right now she had nothing but a feeling and a half-finished sentence about his signature. She got up, found her small handbag, and counted what was left of 3 months' salary. The following Saturday, on her one day off, she took a damful to Computer Village and bought the cheapest digital voice recorder she could find, small enough to sit in her uniform pocket, sensitive enough to pick up a conversation across a room. She tested it that night in her own room, speaking softly to herself, listening back to the playback with her heart in her throat. It worked. Now listen, before we go further, because what happens next is going to make your chest tight, I want you to drop one word in the comments if you've ever sat in a room and watched someone you love being deceived right in front of you and you weren't sure yet if you had enough to prove it. Just type, "I understand," because Ireti was about to learn that suspecting something and proving something are two different mountains to climb. And if you want to see exactly how she climbed hers, make sure you're subscribed to Abby's Stories Empire because this story is far from finished. The recorder went everywhere with her after that, in her apron pocket during meals, on the side table during evening checkups, angled towards the door. She learned to start it with a practiced flick of her thumb before walking into any room where Adaeze and Tobena sat together. She caught more over the following weeks. Pieces, fragments, a mention of a lawyer named Barrister Onuebubu, who Adaeze trusted completely and Pa Bernard had never personally met. A reference to the dosage that made no sense to her at first, until one evening she had Adaeze say in French while reviewing his medication chart with Tobena, "The doctor said twice daily, 5 milligrams. If we move it to 3 times daily slowly over a few weeks, his heart won't tolerate it. It will look natural. A man his age, his condition, nobody will ask questions." Tobena's voice quieter. "And if someone does ask questions, who is going to ask?" Adaeze's voice had a small laugh folded into it. "The maid? She doesn't even know what dosage means in English, let alone French." Ireti, standing in the doorway with a tray of evening tea, felt her whole body go very still. This was not a will. This was not a transfer of property. This was a plan to kill him. She set the tray down very carefully because her hands had begun to shake and she did not trust them not to drop something. She checked his medication bottles that same night, comparing the pharmacy labeled dosage against what she'd actually been instructed through a typed note left by the doctor's office supposedly to administer. The numbers didn't match. Someone had been quietly increasing the frequency, a little at a time, exactly as Adaeze described, and routing the instructions through Ireti herself without her realizing she was the one carrying out the early stages of it. Her stomach turned at the thought. She had been administering it, unknowingly, her own hands.
She needed real proof now. Not just recordings of conversation, but something concrete enough to stop this before it finished what it had already started. She thought about the family doctor, but she barely knew the man and had no way to reach him directly without raising questions. Instead, she did something simpler. The following morning, while helping Pa Bernard with his breakfast, she mentioned carefully, casually, that she'd heard something troubling about land disputes in his home village and wondered if his long-time family nurse from years back, the one who used to visit before Ireti came, might still have his old emergency contacts in case something ever happened and the hospital needed a fuller history. Pa Bernard, who had a soft spot for Ireti wide enough to drive a truck through, didn't think twice. He gave her the number for Nurse Comfort, a woman who had cared for him for nearly a decade before retiring, and mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that Comfort still had copies of his original medical instructions from his cardiologist, in case the new doctor's office ever loses something. You know how these places are. It was exactly what Ireti needed. She called Nurse Comfort that same week, framed as a professional courtesy call between caregivers, and asked to confirm the original prescribed dosage. Comfort read it out without hesitation. Twice daily, 5 milligrams, completely unchanged from years ago until 6 weeks ago when the instructions I was given started increasing without any doctor's order. She had her proof. The fourth time French moved through that house came with laughter in it. Easy, comfortable laughter, the kind people only allow themselves when they are completely certain no one is listening who matters. Friday, Adaeze said, pouring wine at dinner. Pa Bernard seated right between them, oblivious, cutting his fish. Doctor's appointment is Friday. After that, we increase it one final time. By Sunday, it will be done. Bernard lifted his glass slightly, almost a toast, and the maid administers the dose as usual. Exactly, Adaeze smiled at Pa Bernard, switched effortlessly into English. More wine, my love? Please, he held out his glass, completely unaware that his wife had just scheduled his death 4 sentences earlier in a language she was certain meant nothing to the woman standing 2 feet behind his chair. Ireti's thumb found the recorder in her pocket and pressed it without looking down. The 5th time was the one that turned the knife fully toward her. It was 2 nights before Friday. Adaeze and Bernard sat in the study again, door not even closed this time, voices unbothered and loose. If something goes wrong, Bernard was saying, if anyone investigates the dosage records, it's her name on the administration log, Adaeze said simply. Every single entry, the nurse's signature, not mine, not yours. If anyone asks questions, there is a clear, documented trail showing the maid increased his medication without authorization. Tragic mistake. Untrained girl, in over her head, made a fatal error. And if she tries to say otherwise, Adaeze laughed. That same short, careless sound from the very first day. Who is going to believe a village nurse with an OND over the grieving widow and the grieving son? Please. Ireti stood frozen in the hallway outside that door. The tray in her hands suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. They were not just planning to kill him, they were planning to make her the one carrying it. Friday came. Pa Bernard's appointment with the cardiologist went smoothly, a small, almost comforting normalcy that made Ireti's chest ache with how little he suspected. He came home in good spirits, joked with the driver, asked Ireti about her week. That evening, his condition crashed. It happened fast, his breathing catching, his face going grey, his hand reaching for his chest at the dinner table, while Adaeze gasped theatrically, and Bernard was already impossibly fast on the phone, not to an ambulance first, Ireti noticed in the chaos, but to someone else, speaking low and urgent. The ambulance came. Pa Bernard was rushed out, unconscious, his hand briefly catching Ireti's wrist as they wheeled him past her. A single weak squeeze, like he was trying to tell her something even now. At the hospital, while doctors worked behind closed doors, Adaeze was already speaking to 2 policemen who had been called in, her voice trembling beautifully, her hand pressed to her chest. The nurse, she's been managing his medication. I don't understand what happened. I trusted her completely. One of the officers turned toward Ireti, who stood frozen by the corridor wall. Ma'am, we need you to come with us for questioning. The trap, the one built so patiently over weeks of careless French conversations, had finally closed. They sat her down in a small hospital administration office. Adaeze stood near the door, arms crossed, her face arranged into something between grief and righteous suspicion. She increased the dosage without consulting anyone, Adaeze said in English, every trace of warmth gone from her voice. I have the administration log, her signature on every entry. The officer turned to Ireti. Is this true? Did you administer the medication? Ireti's voice, when it came, was very quiet. Oui, je l'ai fait. Parce que vous me l'avez demandé. Yes, I did, because you told me to. The room went completely still. Adaeze's face didn't move for a full 3 seconds, like her body hadn't yet caught up with what her ears had heard. What did you just say? Ireti looked at her, calm, steady, the calm of a woman who has spent 6 weeks waiting for exactly this moment. I said I did it because you told me to. I repeated it again, slower, in clear, unhurried French, watching the blood drain from Adaeze's face in real time. You said his heart wouldn't tolerate 3 doses a day. You said it would look natural. You said the maid doesn't even know what dosage means in English, let alone French. She turned slightly toward the officer. I have it recorded, several conversations. I have the call I made to his former nurse confirming the original prescribed dosage, 5 milligrams, twice daily, completely unchanged for years, until 6 weeks ago when the instructions I was given started increasing without any doctor's order. She reached into her bag, hands no longer shaking, and placed the small recorder on the table. And I have this, every word. The officer pressed play. Adaeze's own voice filled the small room, teeny but unmistakable, laughing about a jar lid, about a maid who couldn't tell the difference between French and silence, about a man's heart and a Friday and a Sunday and a signature that wouldn't need explaining because she'd already explained it for him 100 times. Tobena sat down slowly in the chair behind him, his face the color of old paper. Adaeze tried once more. This could be edited. This could be anything. You cannot prove. The door opened. It was Barrister Adeyemi, not Onyegu, the lawyer Adaeze trusted, but a different man entirely, older, unfamiliar to her, holding a slim folder under his arm. Mrs. Okonji, he said evenly, I think we should talk about the will Pa Bernard updated 6 weeks ago, quietly, without telling either of you. Adaeze's face went completely white. He came to me himself, the lawyer continued, said something felt wrong in his house, said he wanted protection just in case. He didn't say why, he just said he trusted his instincts. He glanced toward Ireti. He also mentioned a young nurse he trusted completely, said if anything ever happened to him, she should be the first person consulted. Pa Bernard survived that night. It was close, the doctor said. Another hour without intervention and the story would have ended very differently. But he survived, and 3 days later, propped up in a hospital bed with tubes still in his arm, he listened to the recording himself, his face moving through disbelief, grief, and something that looked almost like shame for trusting so completely. When it finished, he reached for Ireti's hand on the edge of the bed. All this time, he said quietly, all this time you understood every word and you said nothing. Ireti said, I was building something that would actually protect you, not just my own anger. He held her hand a moment longer. You are the only person in that house who never wanted anything from me, and it turns out you are the only one who gave me everything. The police investigation moved quickly once the evidence was laid out in full. The recordings, the medication discrepancies, the falsified instructions, the rushed timeline matching exactly the dates Adaeze and Tobena had discussed in French at his own dinner table. Both were charged. The forged transfer documents Tobena had been preparing never reached a signature. Pa Bernard recovered, slowly, the way old hearts do. He insisted, against every protest Ireti raised, on covering the full cost of her nursing degree, and insisted further, with the same stubbornness he'd once used to fight open a jam jar lid, that she would always have a place in his house, not as staff anymore, as family. People often say knowledge is power. I don't think that's true. Sometimes the greatest power is letting people believe they've already figured you out. Adaeze thought Ireti was too uneducated to understand French. Tobena thought silence meant ignorance. They forgot something that many of us forget in real life. Just because someone speaks little does not mean they know little. The quietest person in the room is often the one paying the closest attention. And here's another lesson that stayed with me long after I finished writing this story. When people think there will be no consequences, they stop hiding who they really are. That is why character always reveals itself eventually. Not when people are watching, but when they believe nobody understands. Tell me something honest in the comments. If you are Ireti, standing in that room, hearing them plan something so wicked in a language they assumed was a locked door, would you have spoken up immediately, or would you have done exactly what Ireti did and waited for the proof that could actually protect you? Pa Bernard trusted his wife, he trusted the son he raised, but in the end, the only person who truly protected him was the employee everyone overlooked. So tell me honestly, have you ever discovered that the people closest to you were the very ones hurting you, while the person everyone ignored turned out to be the most loyal? If you've lived through something like that, tell us your story. Let's see how many of us have learned that lesson the hard way. People will always reveal who they truly are the moment they believe no one in the room can understand them. The real lesson here is not just about language, it's about listening. Sometimes the greatest power you have is not speaking first, it's letting people show you exactly who they are while they think you are deaf to the truth. Be careful who you trust with your life. Betrayal rarely comes from strangers. It usually comes from the people who already have a seat at your table. This is Abby Stories Empire. Here, we don't just tell African stories. We tell the kind that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Stories that make you question people. Stories that make you call your parents. Stories that remind you that kindness is never weakness and silence is not the same thing as ignorance. If that's the kind of storytelling you love, subscribe and become part of our family. And don't leave just yet. There's another powerful story waiting on your screen right now. And if this one kept you until the end, I have a feeling the next one will stay with you even longer. I'll see you there.